I wanted to actually talk about reproduction in here as an argument for God's handiwork. Literally, I want to show you some of the really cool design features. Like, reproduction would be impossible from an evolutionary perspective. And I want to demonstrate that to you now. So don't be alarmed when you see a uterus on the screen, okay? You guys are shocked. So on the screen, we have a uterus. We have, coming out from the side, these are called oviducts. It's a fancy term for egg tubes, fallopian tubes. They come down and grab what look like kind of water wings on the side. Those are ovaries, okay? And the ovaries are what produce the eggs. In fact, that's what ovary means. Produces the eggs. And so the fallopian tubes come down and they actually have like finger-like processes. They come out and they grab the ovaries there. So let's start talking about ovulation for a second. Every 28 days, a woman releases an egg, sometimes more than one egg, and they actually take turns. Ovary releases an egg, next month, this one releases. Then this one, they're courteous. And if one gets damaged, guess what? Your body knows to start releasing one every month from the one working ovary. So let's talk about that first miracle. Here's the first miracle. When an egg is released from a fallopian tube, it releases, the fallopian tube doesn't know where it's going to be released. It could be released anywhere on the ovary. What happens is the fallopian tube with those finger-like processes will actually feel around and grabs the egg. Now here you have the follicle. The egg actually develops in a follicle inside the ovary. And what happens is mostly follicle here. The egg gets ejected out, gets thrown out. Now this is cool. What happens is if it gets ejected and it doesn't go into the oviduct, we're in big trouble, okay? For one, you could, if it got fertilized, it could create an ectopic pregnancy. This happens, where it grows inside the abdomen, okay? Inside that abdominal cavity, I should say. Now, so you need to get it into the fallopian tube, which is eventually going to go to the uterus. That's going to make the baby, okay? Whereas the baby's going to implant. And so you got to have that right there on the ovary. Well, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like if, you have a pitcher and a back catcher. Have you been to a baseball game? And the catcher doesn't want to miss the ball. So he walks out to the pitcher and he puts his glove onto the pitcher's hand and says, "Pitch it. I think I can catch this one." Okay? Because if you miss it, this is going to be the end of life. You need to get this right. And so it turns out this happens. You guys aren't impressed yet. So I got to go further. I got to impress you guys. All right, let's keep going. So after the egg is released, supposing it's not fertilized, there's this little thing. It's yellow here. The follicle actually starts to break down, and it turns into what's called the Corpus Luteum. The Corpus Luteum, it's Latin. It just means yellow body, but if I just said yellow body, you guys wouldn't think I'm very smart. So Corpus Luteum starts to break down here. Now, this is bad news for the ladies. It's actually bad news for humanity, because the Corpus Luteum, you can actually see it. It becomes a large scar. The ovary is about the size of an almond without the shell. If you hold it at arm's length from you, you would actually be able to see, without a microscope, the scar on the ovary produced from this Corpus Luteum. Now imagine the next month goes by and the egg's not fertilized. You get another scar, good sized scar. And then the next month goes by. After 4 or 5 months, the ovary is nothing but scar tissue and no longer produces eggs. And that's the end of life. And there's no such thing as humans, or mammals for that matter. But that's not the issue. In fact, what we need is a little bit of a miracle. We need a scar that's produced that actually dissolves. Now, how many of you guys have scars? And are they going to go away? Like, have you kind of settled with the fact that you're going to have that scar till you die? Yeah, that's because it's a tissue mass that you will have. A scar is the connective tissue isn't lined up anymore, and this mass forms. So you have a scar. The one place in the human body, and it's in females, in the ovary, the scar actually gets broken down. It's an absolute miracle. And so they can keep producing eggs every month, and there's not a problem, okay? So that would be the end of life. but still, you guys are not impressed. So let's keep going. I'll impress you before the night's over. All right, so you guys know how this works. You got to get the sperm and egg together so you can fertilize the egg to get the zygote, to get life created, human life created. And so the sperm's going to go, the egg's going to go one way from the ovary. The sperm goes the other way. They meet in about the first third of the oviduct, the fallopian tube, inside there. Now, here's the thing. You're probably thinking, well, I can imagine how the sperm gets out. They got that tail, the flagella. Well, it turns out that's not how they get into the fallopian tube. They actually get there through the musculature of the uterus. Even if the tail doesn't work, it'll still get there. So you got the musculature sending the sperm one way, but how do you get the egg the other way down the oviduct? Well, absolute miracle. Check this out, all right? There's actually these things called cilia. They're like little hairs, and they line the inside of the fallopian tube. And they move, and they push the egg down the fallopian tube. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how do they do that? Do they all just start going? That wouldn't move anything. Oh, you're probably thinking, I know how it works. They all kind of go together. So everybody this way, everybody this way. Well, that wouldn't move it. Like window wipers, that's just going to push it this way, push it that way, right? Some of you have got stuff on your window and you've tried with the windshield and it just goes back and forth, right? That's what would happen. Oh, this is awesome. Are you guys ready? I don't think you're ready. I was going to get you to do the wave. Can we try that? I'm serious. You start. And you'd see how hard it is. Have you been to a baseball game? And the people that don't participate, you boo, you don't like those people, right? Because they ruin it. And that's human beings. That's rational human beings who know how to work. How do these... Well, it turns out these guys actually use what's called metacronal rhythm. You don't seem impressed. Metacronal rhythm. That is the wave you see at a baseball game. And that's how these guys move down the fallopian tube. These cilia, whoa, they do that. And that's what sends the egg down. Now listen, if they didn't do that, if they didn't move in that perfect rhythm, then you would have potentially a fertilized egg sitting in the fallopian tube. What happens? If a fertilized egg gets stuck in the fallopian tube and it's not moving anywhere, you will have a tubal pregnancy, which is a medical emergency. Both mother and unborn child will die, okay? It grows inside the fallopian tube, it bursts, hemorrhage. And so you have a serious problem. And sadly, those things do happen. Now, so these guys are pushing. So listen, this is the end of life. If you don't get the cilia moving the fertilized egg down the fallopian tube, you're done. And listen, this is irreducible complexity at its finest, because if you can't do this, you can't reproduce. And evolution relies on reproduction. The definition of is differentiated reproduction. You have to get your offspring in the next generation. But if you can't produce offspring, that's it. That's extinction. It gets worse, though. So the egg and the sperm, they meet together. And this is a really cool miracle. You guys are going to like this, I think. You got to get the contents of the DNA from the sperm into the egg, okay? So how are you going to do that? Well, so the egg, there's three barriers. The sperm comes up and it meets the outside, it meets the egg, but around the egg there's this sticky stuff. It's called cumulus oophorus. Everybody say cumulus oophorus. Cumulus oophorus. I just like saying that. The cumulus oophorus, it secretes cells that secrete a sticky goop around the cell. Now this is really important because you know those cilia? They actually grab the sticky goop and push the cell down. Without the sticky goop, it doesn't move. You ever seen like at Marineland, the seal that has the ball on its nose and you can spin it? I don't know how he does it. But he can get the ball spinning on his nose. That's what happens. They've actually done tests on rabbits. They've taken the cumulus oophorus off the egg, put it in the fallopian tube, and it doesn't move. So you need the cumulus oophorus to get it to move, but we have a problem. The sperm cannot get through the cumulus oophorus. Or can it? Well, it turns out there's an enzyme in the sperm, a very highly specialized enzyme that actually digests the cumulus oophorus just outside. So all this stuff out here, the sperm's able to go through and digest all that material. Now, these are two separate cells from two different organisms. And yet when they come together for the first time, this one has the enzyme to get through this one. There we go. All right. I mean, I didn't design it, but you guys should be impressed. So that's the first thing. It gets through the cumulus oophorus, but there's another problem. Not only does it have to get through that, it has to get through the Zona Pellucida. That is this area here. Now, I made it red. It's the clear zone. Actually, Zona Pellucida actually means clear zone. But again, call it the clear zone. Nobody cares about that. The zona. To get through the zona, you need another enzyme, a very highly specific enzyme, and that enzyme eats through the shell here. It's not like a shell like a chicken egg, okay? These eggs have a shell that's kind of like Jell-O, okay? And it gets through the zona, and if the two come together and they're the same organ, the same species, then the egg cell says, okay, send your DNA in here. And that's what happens. Now, there's still a big problem, because once you get the DNA into the egg and it's fertilized, you have life, but you have all these other sperm trying to get in as well. And if one more sperm gets into that egg, it's the end of life. It's the end of life. And so what happens? Well, just in the inside of the cell membrane, just on the inside of the egg cell membrane, there's what's called cortical granules, and they just sit there on the end. And as soon as that cell, that sperm cell, penetrates the membrane, releases its DNA, all those things explode. And it releases these fine granules into the Zona Pellucida, and it hardens instantly. And all of the sperm that were fighting to get in there are frozen right where they are. They're locked in place. Is somebody impressed with that? I spent hours doing this. You guys are like, huh? Yeah, he is. This is the handiwork of God designing life. No one can explain this. This has to be just right. Like I said, you don't get another crack at it, okay? If you don't get this right, you don't reproduce. You don't leave offspring to the next generation for nature to select from. It has to be all in place. The enzymes have to be right. The cumulus has to be there. The cilia have to do their thing. All right. We're making good time. All right. Yeah, give God some credit here.